Hey everyone, I'm CJ from CJ's Coins and Crafts, and welcome to NumisCast. This program is dedicated to exploring, learning, and understanding our coinage. Today, we will be talking about some of the different types of errors that can be found in coin collecting. Before we dive into all the types of errors that can be found, we first need to define what an error is. It is common among newer collectors to use the terms error and variety interchangeably. This is far from the case, as the difference between an error and a variety are like oil and water. An error is a failure that occurs during the minting process, while a variety is a variation with a die or design. Errors are generally considered as one-off events, while varieties can be found on every single coin that is struck with those particular dies. Mint error coins can be the result of deterioration of the minting equipment, accidents, or malfunctions during the minting process, or even intentional interventions by mint personnel. With the basics out of the way, there are going to be three areas of errors that I'm going to cover during this episode. Planchet errors, errors that occur specifically with the coin or planchet. Die or hub errors, errors with the dies that are used to strike the coin. And striking errors, errors that happen during the actual minting or the actual striking process. So the first type we will discuss are planchet type errors. The first type of error that you can find is a blank planchet. These are coins that somehow went through the mint and had failed to be struck into a coin. There are two types of planchets. A type 1 is technically still just a coin blank because it has not received its rim by the upset mill. A type 2 is after the upset mill has given the coin the rim. A clipped planchet. A clipped planchet can come in a variety of different forms, but the most common of these is the curved clip. This comes from the blanking process where the material is misfed and a blank is stamped out of an area where another blank has already been cut. When these type of planchets go into the upset mill, the lack of material on one side, aka the clip, the rim on the other side, on the opposite side, will be absent or weak. We know this as the Blakesley effect. That is not guaranteed to be on every single clip, but it is one of the biggest things that we look for as coin collectors when determining is this post-mint damage or if this is a true clipped planchet. Improper planchet thickness. The material that was previously smelted into ingots and incorrectly rolled out, whether that's either too thin or too thick, is an improper planchet thickness. A diagnostic that can be used to determine improper planchet thickness is to use calipers to physically measure the coin. There will be a small tolerance per denomination that is set for by the mint. A subsequent product of a thick or thin planchet is the weight of the coin. On thin planchets, there will be significant weakness of design, as there would not be enough material to fill that space on striking. An improper alloy mixture. When the metals are smelted in the beginning of the minting process, and the metals are not mixed properly or thorough enough, the resulting rolled material will have areas where the metals are not fully bonded. Up through the 1950s, Lincoln cents, coins that have improper alloy mixtures will have stripes of coloration in them. These stripes can be light and dark and generally resemble a wood grain. Hence the term given to these to describe them as woody or woody coins. A lamination. Lamination errors are technically a delamination, so a breakdown in the layers, which is a separation of layers. A lamination error is a planchet defect that results from metal impurities or internal stresses. And lamination errors can cause discoloration, uneven surfaces, peeling, and even splitting. Cladding issues. Cladding issues generally come from some type of foreign material that prevents a metal clad to adhere to the coin face. Examples of this would be a dime that looks like it's copper, a Lincoln cent struck on a zinc planchet that looks gray or silver. A key point in a missing clad layer or a cladding issue is the details of the coin strike are very clear and very defined, and there would generally be and likely still be mint luster on the coin. One thing that collectors will find are Lincoln cents that have had their their copper layer chemically stripped. This leaves a very broken up and spotty surface underneath, which is one of the diagnostics to see if it was a post mint or if it was a true mint error. Our second section is all about the dies or hubs used to strike the coins. Missing design elements. One of the main causes of missing design elements is grease-filled dies. This is where the grease that is used to prolong the life of the die and also the mint equipment is compacted into a design which prevents the metal from the coin, the planchet, to fill the space and create the relief design. Another cause of a missing design is a tilted die. So if a die that is not set into the press correctly, then the pressure is not distributed evenly across the surface of the coin. A doubled die. A doubled die is a die or hub that had received an additional or misaligned impression during the hubbing process. Depending on who you talk to, there's either 8 or 9 classes of doubled dies. And we do go into detail for the different classifications at a later episode. Die fatigue events. I kind of classify these as there's a bunch of different events that happen, and all of them have to do with die fatigue, so I put them into this category. There are a number of events that can happen to the dies during the striking process as the dies fatigue. Cracks in the metal can develop, which show up on the coins as raised jagged lines. Not necessarily always jagged, but generally that's what they look like. When one of these die cracks goes all the way across a die face, it is called a bisecting die crack, where it's bisecting the face of the coin. A shattered die can be identified on a coin with die cracks that go to 3 or more points at the rim. If a die crack goes from one point at the rim to another point at the rim, this is a retained die crack. This area could break away from the rest of the die, and the resulting area on the coin would be a blob of unstruck material on the coin that is missing any kind of details or any kind of design elements. And this anomaly is called a cud. And this always involves a section or an area on the rim. Dies can have small bits that break off the face of the die because of stresses, and these are called die chips. Often you'll hear collectors calling small die chips on the face of the coin cuds. Technically, as far as definition, and again, depending on who you read or who you talk to, anything on the interior of the die face, it would be a die chip. Something that is involving specifically the rim is generally considered a cud. A die clash. A die clash event is when two opposing dies come together without a planchet or a coin in between. The dies will strike each other and leave impressions of their designs on the opposite die face. When coins are struck with these clash dies, these impressions will show up on the coins. So, for example, the Lincoln Memorial Cent if there was a die clash event and a coin was struck with those clash dies, they will have the bays of the memorial building on the obverse, which makes it look like vertical bars. And these have been called jailed Lincolns, or jail cell Lincolns, as these lines resemble the bars of a jail cell. Punching errors. This category is technically an error, as it is a breakdown in the minting process, but is much more commonly used and identified on the variety side of coin collecting, specifically repunch mint marks. So prior to 1990, the mint marks for each of the minting facilities were punched into the working die by hand. If the mint mark was not deep enough, had the incorrect orientation, or even in the wrong location, it had to be punched into the die again. One very specific example of incorrect mint mark placement is the 1975 Jefferson Nickel that was struck at the Denver Mint. There have been a few coins identified as having a high D, where the mint mark was inadvertently punched higher up than the normal location on the obverse of the nickel, just about and just next to the 5 in the date, versus where the normal space is, and that's below the date. So this category also includes misplaced dates, misplaced digits, and this is talking about some of our earlier coinage when the date numerals were added by hand, just like the mint marks were punched in by hand. The Indian head small cent is an excellent example of misplaced numbers or misplaced dates. The theory is that mint employees would test the numeral punch in an out-of-the-way place on the die to test how hard the die is, so that they know exactly how hard they have to hit it when placing it in the correct location. A lot of these misplaced digits can be found on the earlier coinage in the dentals or in the denticles, and is a really good key reference pickup point when looking for different die varieties. We'll cover that in our variety series. Over dates and over mint marks. Both of these are also more used on the variety side of coin collecting, but an over date and an over mint mark come from the same type of error or error process. In an over date, such as the 1942 over 1 Mercury dime, or even the 1918 over 17 Buffalo nickel, are two examples of a die being used to hub over an existing design versus going back to like the master die and creating a new working hub. The over mint mark comes from situations where dies that have already had mint marks punched into them were sent to another minting facility to fulfill business needs. The receiving facility must place their mint mark into the die and strike it harder than the first one to make the mint mark stronger than the first. Mules. Muled coins are where the obverse and reverse designs are from different denominations or different dies. One of the most recent and very popular of these was the 2000 Philadelphia Sacagawea dollar coin that had the Washington quarter obverse and then the Sacagawea dollar reverse. A Muled Clash. This is a very unique category, is when two dies of different denominations are clashed. Specifically, a few of the well-known Muled Clash coins are in the Flying Eagle series, specifically the 1857. There are three examples for the 1857 Flying Eagle cents where the obverse or reverse were clashed with an often denominational die. Those three dies are for the $20 gold piece, the seeded quarter, and the seeded half dollar. Misaligned dies, or mad strikes. Misaligned die strikes are where one or both of the dies are improperly set into the press. These appear much more on the obverse of the coins than the reverse and are common to find. Newer collectors often refer to these as off-center, but an off-center strike would affect both sides of the coin. And this category label is used for both horizontally and vertically misaligned die strikes. Our last category is striking errors. And generally, these are all the errors that occur specifically in the striking chamber. This is just a small handful of ones that I selected. Again, we can go into more detail on later episodes because there are a ton. Broad strikes. A broad strike is when the planchet is struck outside the collar. And a broad strike can be both centered or uncentered. So either centered or uncentered. And to qualify as a broad strike, the full design must be present on both sides of the coin. If the design is cut off on either side, it would be considered an off-center strike. A die cap. This category has two parts: a capped die and a struck-through capped die. The difference is a capped die is when the die strikes a planchet and it gets stuck to the face of the die. That coin or set of coins on the face of the die that are stuck is actually the die cap. When coins are struck through this capped die, the reverse of the coin will be normal, while the obverse of the coin will appear blank or have a rough outline of the design, which is generally considered a late stage struck through capped die. And additional planchets can actually stack up on the die face, which is called a pileup, a cluster, or bonded coins. So as you think about the striking process, when the die is capped and additional planchets are fed into the striking chamber, and they just continue to stack up and get struck together, you can think of that as like a bonded mess of coins. A brockage. A brockage occurs when a coin is struck, but not properly ejected, and then a new planchet is fed into the striking chamber, and the former coin overlaps the new planchet. This will create a mirror image of the reverse design into the new coin, and this could be either a full brockage or a partial brockage. Strikethroughs. This category could be any number of things that happen to be in the path of the dies as they strike a coin. Cloth, staples, wire, string, and other items have been identified and authenticated through the grading companies as true mint errors. Another possibility is struck through grease. Grease is used to prolong the life of the coin. Will have a really faded or weak design elements. And it is even possible that the grease gets compacted into one of these device elements, like a letter or a number. Then if that impacted piece comes out of that device and lands on the coin, when the next strike is happening, it could be struck through basically a grease number or grease letter, which is considered a dropped letter. And this particular situation is an extremely rare situation. A uniface coin. A uniface coin is generally when two planchets are fed into the striking chamber and they are both struck at the same time. This would leave the top coin only having an obverse and the bottom coin only having a reverse. Multiple strikes or a multi-strike coin. Multiple strikes occur when the struck coin has failed to be ejected from the striking chamber, but no new planchets have been fed into the striking chamber. And there is a number of variations of the multi-strike between being on center and off center, in or out of color strikes, flipped over or closely spaced, or even delayed strikes. Struck on wrong planchet. This is one that is commonly misidentified by novice collectors. To properly identify this, would need to be measured in both weight and size, thickness and diameter, to ensure that it is outside the tolerances for that denomination. Depending on the denomination and possible incorrect planchet, there will be a number of diagnostics of design stretching or missing design features that will add credence to this case. Another avenue that collectors will often jump to is that their coin is struck on a foreign planchet. Again, measures must be taken to confirm this information. Weight and the diameter of the coin in question, and then referenced with the list of years and denominations that particular mint facility did actually strike. And this information is extremely valuable and extremely valued when, and will nearly always rule out the coin being struck on a foreign planchet. That doesn't say that it can't happen, but all of that information can really rule down a lot of options. Now, these are just a handful of the errors that I selected that you might come across while coin collecting. I will include and expand on this list later in the series. If you have any particular errors that you would like to see some more information on, please let me know down in the comments below. If you enjoy these series, please also hit the subscribe button. It lets me know that you guys like this series and that you want to see more. I hope you enjoyed this episode and it helped increase your knowledge and understanding on this topic, and I thank you for joining me today while covering error coins. Hope to see you on the next one.